Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's program, we'll be examining the situation on the border between Israel and Lebanon, speaking to a spokesperson for the UN peacekeeping mission UNIFIL. Plus, we'll get the latest on President Donald Trump's plans to reopen the infamous Alcatraz prison and ask, is that plan viable? Hello and welcome to the programme. Last November, Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire aimed at ending over a year of fighting. Well, under that deal, Israeli forces were to withdraw from Lebanon, allowing the Lebanese army to take control, whilst Hezbollah agreed to pull back at least 20 miles north of the Israeli border. Well, 6 months on, the ceasefire remains fragile. Concerns persist over the Lebanese army's ability to both secure the border and oversee Hezbollah's disarmament. Meanwhile, Israel continues to hold 5 positions along the border, citing incomplete disarmament. And Israeli airstrikes are still targeting areas of southern Lebanon. Well, for more on the peacekeeping effort along the border, we can speak now to Kandice Ardiel, who is the deputy spokesperson for UNIFIL, who joins us from Naqoura, which is in southern Lebanon. Just for the benefit of our viewers, Naqoura is the home of the HQ, the headquarters of the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL. It has been for about 50 years now. We've heard from the UNIFIL head of mission and the force commander, Haroldo Lazaro, him saying the situation is better, but it's still fragile, he says. And since you're about 4 kilometers from Israeli territory, let me just start by asking you how you would describe the situation on the border.
Thanks, Tom. Indeed, I would agree with that assessment. The situation right now is certainly better than it was a few months ago when we were seeing hundreds of shells coming across the border every day, where we had an active ground invasion and active fighting here on Lebanese territory. The situation now is definitely better than it was, which is not to say that it's perfect. We still have Israeli troops who remain in Lebanese territory. We're still seeing airstrikes happening on a regular basis, which we consider as peacekeepers a violation of Resolution 1701. We're still finding weapons caches that have been left behind by armed groups in Lebanon from the conflict. And so the situation now, while it is better, it does remain fragile. There is still the potential for us to return to the conflict. And this is why peacekeepers continue to remain here and continue to do their work here in South Lebanon.
And Kandice, it's a long border, isn't it? It's about 120 kilometers. And if that's not right, please do correct me. But my question is, does the situation vary from place to place along the length of that border?
Indeed, it does. Here in Naqoura, as you mentioned, we're not far from the Israeli, from the blue line, on the other side of which, of course, is Israel. And here it has been relatively quiet in the last little while, but nonetheless, there are parts of the blue line that have seen significant activity and where we have seen airstrikes, including recently in a couple of villages, more in the central part of our area of operations just yesterday. And our area of operations is quite large, but nonetheless, it does, the 120 kilometers is quite short when you think about it. And we've got 5 positions in which the Israeli Defense Forces still remain. And that's a significant concern for us as peacekeepers. And it is a significant concern for the people who live here who want to return to their villages.
I'm just wondering how the UNIFIL peacekeepers patrol it. I mean, it's still a long area. I mean, are they using presumably vehicles, any aerial patrols? Is some of it done on foot?
For us right now, it's mainly done in vehicles for safety reasons, because we have actually a lot of the roads that cross our area of operations are now impassable. We've seen unexploded ordinances that have been left behind, for example, bombs that have been dropped that didn't explode. So for safety reasons, peacekeepers are generally in vehicles and often in armored vehicles close to the blue line, just because of the danger that these things present, and also because of the risk of misunderstanding, again, because there still remain Israeli troops who are here in Lebanese territory. We don't want to engage in any misunderstandings that might put our peacekeepers in danger. So peacekeepers are patrolling, they're keeping an eye out. We're undertaking counter-rocket launching operations. We're undertaking activities to clear the roads to ensure that peacekeepers have access to the areas that they want to patrol and that they want to monitor. And so all of these activities continue to take place. But for safety reasons, most of our patrols are happening by vehicle. And if any, there are not many patrols happening on foot, but if they are, they're further from the blue line.
Okay, and indeed it is dangerous. According to the latest numbers, I saw 339 peacekeepers have been killed since UNIFIL began its mission in 1978. And you mentioned some of the dangers there. Just tell us a bit more about how Israeli soldiers tend to respond when they encounter UNIFIL peacekeepers. What's the typical response?
So we haven't had a lot of direct interaction with the Israeli forces. We tend to keep our distance. We're here as peacekeepers to de-escalate the situation. The negotiations in that respect, the discussions, they don't happen on the ground. Those happen at a higher level between the leaders of our mission and the IDF and the Lebanese armed forces. So those discussions about urging the Israeli army to withdraw, urging the Lebanese armed forces to come and deploy to South Lebanon, which they have, as much as they can at the moment. Those are happening at the more senior levels through our leadership, through our head of mission and force commander. On the ground, we're simply monitoring what's happening, monitoring any violations of Resolution 1701, which, as I mentioned, include the presence and activities of Israeli forces in South Lebanon, include the weapons caches that we're discovering that have been left behind from the conflict by armed forces, armed groups on the Lebanese side. So we're continuing those conversations, but the interactions that we have seen between our peacekeepers on the ground and the IDF are minimal, and the conversations are happening at the higher level.
Okay, and as you say, the presence of those remaining Israeli forces is a violation of Resolution 1701. How are violations dealt with?
So our job here as peacekeepers is to monitor and report what is happening. We have a mandate from the Security Council. We report what we see to the Security Council. We're kind of the impartial referee to keep track of who is doing what. So we report violations to the Security Council, but anything that is a concern is also reported to the parties. And those are the parties to Resolution 1701, Lebanon and Israel. So if we see a violation, we will report it to the parties to deal with. For example, if we discover a weapons cache, we report that to the Lebanese armed forces and they come and deal with it. If we monitor Israeli troops in Lebanese territory, of course, that information also gets reported to the parties. So we're here to report and monitor and just keep track of what's happening as an impartial observer and monitoring force here in Lebanon.
We've heard from the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, who says that the army is in control of about 85% of the south of Lebanon. Would you concur? Is that how it looks to you?
That sounds about right to me. We've assisted the Lebanese armed forces and supported them in their redeployment to over 120 positions. There's still obviously a few places, that they cannot get to because there still remain Israeli troops there. But the Lebanese armed forces have deployed. They are present. They are visible here in South Lebanon, and peacekeepers are on the ground and continue to support them in their endeavors to implement Resolution 1701 and to bring back that stability that we saw before the conflict began.
So you're saying that the south of Lebanon is now more or less free of Hezbollah?
I would say that we're working very hard alongside the Lebanese armed forces, and the Lebanese armed forces are the ones who have the responsibility to implement that part of Resolution 1701 to free the area of unauthorized weapons between the Litani River and the Blue Line. Peacekeepers are supporting them in those efforts. From what we've seen, there are a number of weapons caches that have been discovered and the Lebanese armed forces have dealt with and destroyed. So we're seeing a lot of progress on that in that regard, and we continue to see progress in that. And we're satisfied with the progress that the Lebanese army is making. We're continuing to support them, and obviously we want to see this area free of weapons in accordance with Resolution 1701.
And what about the infrastructure left behind by Hezbollah in the places they've abandoned? I mean, they're reported to be extensive tunnel networks. I don't know if you've seen any of them for yourself, but what happens to them? Are they being demolished? What's happening to the tunnels?
So we as peacekeepers have come across some different infrastructure, including tunnels, including bunkers, including different things. And we report these to the Lebanese armed forces to deal with, and they will dismantle them and do what needs to be done to ensure, as part of their mandate to implement Resolution 1701, that this infrastructure is not there, that there is no unauthorized weapons south of the Litani River and above the Blue Line.
And what does all of this mean for people who call this area of southern Lebanon home? Are people and have people, by and large, been able to return to their homes?
People are coming back. The villages close to the Blue Line, it's obviously much more difficult. They've seen extensive destruction. Today, I was in the villages of Nakura and El Mashab. They've been heavily damaged during the conflict and even following the ceasefire understanding in November. So it's really difficult for people to return to their homes right now because in some of these villages, the homes are extensively damaged and will need a great deal of repair. Infrastructure is obviously not present. Even roads have been completely destroyed, water infrastructure, electricity, and things like this. So at the moment, while people have been able to return to many of the villages in the south, those in the closest areas to the Blue Line will have a long road ahead of them before they're able to come back. And this is something that's going to be a long-term issue. And it's one of the reasons that we want to see this stability that we had before return, because you see this as evidence of civilians are the ones who suffer in these kinds of conflicts. And we see this in the villages along the Blue Line where people's houses, businesses, and neighborhoods have been destroyed. And it's very heartbreaking to see.
I mean, you'd have thought that UNIFIL peacekeepers would be given a warm welcome and would be gladly, accepted by people that live in this part of Lebanon. But we have read reports of people blocking the patrols. And I'm just wondering why people would do that and who the people are that are blocking the patrols.
Every day we undertake about 250 or so activities, operational activities. And recently there have been a few incidents, but I'll emphasize it's a handful of incidents. These incidents are quite rare. I think the people here, they know us. They've seen us here since 1978. We have strong relationships. If you look at the number of activities we undertake every day, these kinds of incidents are quite rare. But we have seen a few of them recently, and I think it is a sign of the frustration that people have with what has happened in the conflict. And I think it's very difficult for people to see that their villages have been destroyed and they want to express something in a way. And while I don't think it may be fair to blame the peacekeepers for what happened, it is something that we see. And we're working with the communities. We continue to support the communities in their recovery efforts. Obviously, we're a peacekeeping mission. We're not here to do humanitarian work, but we do support communities through donations and projects and things, and we do have strong relationships with them.
And what's your relationship like with the Lebanese army? How does this dynamic work between UNIFIL and the Lebanese armed forces?
We have a very strong relationship with the Lebanese armed forces, as we always have. We work with them every day. We coordinate all of our activities with them. They're aware of what we're doing. They support our activities. They come with us when they can on our activities and when we're able to arrange it. But we do a number of activities independently, and we can go on our own to patrol. But always the Lebanese army we coordinate all of our activities with the Lebanese army, and they support us in what we're doing. We're here to help them. If you look at Resolution 1701, it talks about how the peacekeepers are here to support and assist the Lebanese armed forces in their implementation of Resolution 1701. And this is what we're doing every day.
And do you have anything that could be described as a comparable level of interaction with the Israeli army?
We're here in South Lebanese territory, and obviously the Lebanese Armed Forces under 1701, they're our strategic partners. So we're here to support them in their implementation of Resolution 1701. Our relationship with the IDF is more at the leadership level. So our head of mission and senior leaders have strong relationships with the IDF and discuss with them, urge de-escalation, urge them to withdraw from Lebanese territory. And but they work with them every day on more in the discussion and negotiation level. But our day-to-day work on the ground is in South Lebanon, and therefore it is with the Lebanese army.
Does it look like they're going to withdraw, the Israelis?
For the moment, they haven't said what they're planning to do, but we continue to urge them to withdraw. We continue to urge all the parties to comply with Resolution 1701 and to urge all actors to comply with Resolution 1701. And this does mean a full withdrawal of the IDF from Lebanese territory. And it does mean that that unauthorized weapons south of the Litani River should not be here. So these are the things that are the foundations of what 1701 says, and that we are encouraging both sides to do to really restore security and stability to South Lebanon and to the greater region.
And Kandice, I mean, we've been saying that UNIFIL was deployed to Lebanon in 1978. It was supposed to be a temporary deployment, wasn't it? And yet here we are almost 50 years on and you're still there. Do you see a day when peacekeepers there in the south of Lebanon are no longer needed?
I certainly hope so. I mean, that would be the ultimate sign of our success, that we don't need to be here because there is peace here in South Lebanon. And as peacekeepers, we're optimists. We are here and we're working toward that because we believe that this is possible and we believe that this can happen, and we're not giving up hope. We do believe that peace is possible here someday, and we're working with our partners, with the parties to Resolution 1701 to achieve that.
And just lastly, looking at Lebanon as a whole, during the weekend, there were local elections that were held. I think those were the first local elections in about a decade. Does it feel to you, as someone that lives in Lebanon, like the country has turned the corner and that it's getting back on track?
There's definitely been a shift. There's definitely been a change. And as I said, things feel much more stable than they did a few months ago. But nonetheless, as our head of mission and force commander has emphasized, things remain fragile. We see progress, but that progress can backslide in a moment. And so this is why we must be vigilant and why we as peacekeepers are here working very hard every day, speaking to the parties, encouraging everyone to de-escalate, encouraging everyone to comply with Resolution 1701, because we want to avoid any kind of backsliding. We want to see this progress that we're seeing with these elections, with the stability that is slowly returning to the South. We want to see this continue. So we encourage it. We encourage everyone to continue on this track because this is what's needed right now for the civilians who are living on both sides of the blue line.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Kandice Ardiel, the Deputy Spokesperson for UNIFIL. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Now, the US President Donald Trump wants to reopen one of America's most notorious prisons. Well, the US leader has announced plans to reopen Alcatraz, the infamous island prison in San Francisco Bay. Once home to notorious criminals like Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and the FBI's former public enemy number one, Alvin Karpis. The prison was closed down in 1963 after just 29 years of operation due to the high cost of running it. Well, located on a remote island in waters rumored to be shark-infested, President Trump says its isolation makes it escape-proof.
It represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate. It's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there. It housed the most violent criminals in the world, and nobody ever escaped. When you look at it, it's sort of, you saw that picture that was put out, it's sort of amazing. But it sort of represents something that's both horrible and beautiful and strong and miserable, weak.
Well, tourists visiting Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay reacted to the president's plan to reopen the prison, which is now a popular sightseeing destination, as we heard the president say there. Well, some people support the idea of reopening it, others oppose it.
I don't think that they will, but I think that they absolutely should for the worst of the worst criminals. I mean, I know it's really ran down, but what do they deserve? They don't deserve any more than that, right?
So I just think it's something said just to get a reaction.
They're trying to cut money in services every place across, a board, but it makes absolutely no sense kind of spending that money to do that here. So, but he says things, and sometimes he does them, and sometimes he doesn't.
A waste of money, way too expensive. Hopefully it's just all talk and not serious. It'd be too hard to get potable water, infrastructure, sewer there.
More so, it needs to remain a part of history. I'm a former prison guard, and rehabilitation is real. Punishment is best left in the past.
Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Jenn Pellegrino, the chief spokesperson for the America First Policy Institute, who joins us from Washington. Jenn, great to have you with us. Thank you for your time. I'd just like to start by asking you, what's your feeling about reopening Alcatraz? Is it the right decision?
Tom, thanks so much for having me. Well, I'll speak to how I think the majority of Americans feel. If you consider the last election back in November, crime, safety, immigration, among the top concerns going into that election. And of course, we saw an overwhelming mandate for President Trump to come back to Washington and do the unfinished business of the last administration when he was in office. And again, he's tackling that with something that obviously was pretty surprising for a lot of folks when he mentioned Alcatraz. It's been a tourist attraction outside San Francisco for decades now. But again, you have a number of cities where crime has been a massive issue, even here in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where we have thousands of tourists come every year. And also the concerns around illegal immigration and the violent offenders that are coming here. So I think President Trump in saying, hey, he's going to consider reopening Alcatraz and push for that, that sends a message to those people that we're not going to tolerate this in our country anymore. The last administration did, but it stops with President Trump.
But Alcatraz is quite a small prison by modern prison standards. I mean, when it was last operational, it had space for about 330 detainees. I mean, that's just the tip of an enormous iceberg, isn't it?
It is. And I think the administration, I don't speak for them, but from what I've heard, they're considering a number of different facilities to house some of the most violent offenders. Alcatraz is one of them. Obviously, like you said, only houses a small portion, around 300. They're looking at Gitmo. They're looking at other facilities where we can send these individuals. And again, you consider at least the folks that are coming in here illegally and committing crimes, being let back out on the street. It's sending them a message. Do you want to go back to your home country, with which the administration is really trying to help facilitate? Or do you want to go to one of these prisons where you'll really be cut off from society? And again, Alcatraz, with the history that it's had, been in a lot of movies, people know that is a place that you don't want to go, because nobody on record has ever escaped from there. Many people have been shot and killed. Those that have tried to escape, some have disappeared. So again, it's sending a message to these people. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. And if anybody can make it happen to reopen this facility, it is President Trump.
Okay, so it's a historic landmark as well, isn't it? And we were saying earlier on, before we crossed you, that tourists go there by the millions, by all accounts. So what would you like to see happen? I mean, should it be razed to the ground, and should it be rebuilt? Because in its current state, it's unusable, isn't it?
It's in tough shape, even as a tourist attraction, Tom. There's a lot of work that has to go into it. Obviously, given the fact that it was last open as a prison was back in 1963, there's a lot of upgrades that would need to happen. From what President Trump has said, there would need to be a lot that needs to be redone, a lot of money that goes into it. But again, you go back to the cost of the border crisis over the last 4 years during the previous administration, the cost of deporting individuals, $17,000 a person. I think this is something where President Trump sees an investment opportunity because of the message that it sends, that we're tough on crime, whether you come here illegally or you're somebody that's an American citizen that's being released again and again on the streets. And we have very high recidivism rates. I think it sends a message to people to rethink what they are about to consider doing, because they could end up at one of these places.
Sure. I mean, there's something like 2 million, well, close to 2 million American people, or people in America, I should say, behind bars at this precise moment. This place would take 300 and something of them. And according to my mathematics, that's 0.000168% of the criminal population, or the incarcerated population. What sorts of people and what sorts of criminals, to make this symbolic and have the desired effect, would you think should be sent to Alcatraz?
I think the worst of the worst, Tom, you're looking at your most violent offenders, murderers, the drug cartels. Those are the people that will be sent there to cut them off completely from society because, again, so many of them get back out on the streets. They're recommitting these crimes. Many have been deported only to come back to our country. And I think President Trump sees, what is being done in countries like El Salvador, where they've really cracked down on crime. They have massive prisons there, taking the worst of the worst off their streets. That's really been a game changer for their country. And I think he sees opportunity here on some level to show, that we're standing up against the crime that we've seen in this country and the illegal immigration. Americans simply don't feel safe. So I think obviously it'll make a big difference in messaging going forward.
And do we agree that this is sort of more symbolic than actually addressing the issue of crime, the reopening of Alcatraz?
I think it sends a message, obviously to your point. And again, you can house about 300 people there. I don't know if that capacity might be expanded with a new facility that the administration could construct. But again, it sends a message that, we're turning a corner here. We saw over the last 4 years an administration that was really soft on crime, that, turned a blind eye to all that was going on at our border, in our cities, releasing people back out on the streets. We've had a major issue with that. And again, I think it sends a message to folks going forward that it's not going to be tolerated. So yes, to your point, I think there's some symbolism there, but it's also something that will be a valuable facility going forward.
It's an expensive symbol, though, isn't it? Because I think even when Alcatraz was open, it was it cost 3 times more to house a prisoner there than it did in a mainland prison because of the cost of importing everything from water to food to everything else, not to mention getting the staff to and from their place of work. President Trump's expressed some frustration with what he calls radicalized judges in America. Who are these radicalized judges?
They're people that are in opposition to what the American people mandated back in November of last year. I think it's really shocking to a lot of Americans that voted for President Trump, that supported him, regardless of their politics, that, this is what they chose going forward. This is what they wanted. President Trump has delivered on what he promised on the campaign trail. And now you have these activist judges, as the president calls them, that are trying to block these actions that benefit the American people. It largely feels like, people are asking, well, why are you supporting these criminals that have come here illegally and not the American people and their safety? Because there have been so many families impacted by the border crisis, by the crime we've seen in this country, by a whole host of issues that are trying to block this administration from getting the job done. And again, he had an overwhelming show of support for President Trump and his party in the last election. And so I think there's, a lot of people scratching their heads right now as to how this could be a conversation in this country. Why can't they just get the job done?
Right. In terms of the sort of the mystery and the reputation that surrounds Alcatraz, obviously it's associated with obviously not being a very nice place. But I mean, a feared prison as a deterrent for criminals, does that work? Because when we think of American prisons in different countries, we tend to think of a pretty harsh reality as it is.
Yeah, listen, I think in this country for a number of decades now, there's been a soft approach to crime, and we've seen how that has destroyed so many cities. Again, I can just speak to Washington, D.C. You go out on some of the streets here and have had to have your head on a swivel, watching around you because there's been a lot of issues over the years. And it's, again, not unique to Washington, but I think it's important that this administration sends a message because in the past, what we've seen is past leaders turning a blind eye to the crime that's happening, both on the federal level, state level, in the cities. And I think, again, this is something that's very important to President Trump. It's important to his supporters. And so I think this is a great direction to go. It's really rallying the base right now. And people are tired of feeling like nobody has their back, that they're, those in charge are on the side of the criminals in this country.
There were 25, I believe, executions last year. There have been 15 executions so far this year in the United States. Obviously, California doesn't have the death penalty. Would you like to see, and do you think we're likely to see with President Trump, an increase in the sorts of numbers we saw under President Biden in order to deter would-be criminals?
You know, it's hard to answer that question, Tom. I'm not sure what the president's view is on that, but I, again, would go back to the fact that he really has a tough stance on crime. I know he's mentioned about the drug cartels, all the lives that are lost as a result of their trafficking drugs into our country. So I think, obviously, we'd like to see a tougher stance, whether that's the death penalty with certain individuals as determined by their actions. That remains to be seen. But I think a lot of people are in support of seeing some tougher action compared to what we saw over the last 4 years.
Okay, so possibly more executions, although we don't know. However, in the last weeks and months of the first Trump administration, there was an increase in the number of executions that were carried out. But don't you also need to see the construction of some really large prison facilities? I mean, Alcatraz with a capacity of 336, whatever it is, that doesn't even scratch the surface. I mean, isn't what's needed some really large-scale facilities to deal with these enormous numbers of prisoners? I mean, 2 million is a huge prisoner population.
Yeah, that may be the case. Again, I mentioned earlier the administration is looking into that, looking into a number of other facilities where we've held terrorists and other groups. So I think that will be considered. And I think it's important that the administration looks at that. Again, you know, they've undertaken this massive deportation effort. You look at the crisis with the CBP One app under the last administration that facilitated people coming into this country. We now have the CBP Home app, which is expediting for those that volunteer to self-deport, to get them out of the country. So there's work that's being done, so you don't have to get to that point. But again, we'll see how that plays out. But, you know, the administration is really trying to do everything in their power to keep costs at a minimum and to get the people that came here illegally out of the country, and then obviously tackle the crime that we've already had in our cities.
Yeah, so we've got this plan, and you've mentioned it already, to send some prisoners to other countries like El Salvador. There's rumors of Rwanda possibly being another recipient country for US criminals. The UK visited a similar model, and eventually it was rejected, and the UK did a U-turn on that one. But do you think we're likely to see more of this sort of outsourcing of prisoner facilities to other countries?
It's certainly possible. As we've seen, like I said, President Trump has a great relationship with the president of El Salvador. We've sent a number of individuals there. And I think he'll look to expand that if needed, if there's the appropriate relationships, the appropriate facilities for people that came from those countries to go back to their homeland. Again, you came here illegally, you'll face consequences as a result of that. I know there are people some folks in this country that don't understand that, but I think the majority of people here in this country, especially those that came here legally, feel that these people should be sent back to where they came from.
And just to wrap up this conversation, to go back to where we started about this announcement by President Trump, we sometimes see him do this. He puts out an idea to test the waters, see what the response is like. And if it doesn't get a very warm response, we don't hear too much more about the idea. Do you think this could be one such instance with the reopening of Alcatraz?
Well, it could be if he faces a lot of obstacles in moving that forward. I will say, again, I think the base is really revved up by this idea. Again, it speaks to President Trump thinking outside of the box, thinking about a facility that we've looked at as a tourist destination for a number of decades now. He sees a problem, and there's a solution there in reopening that facility. And again, a place that really sends a strong message that we will not be tolerating the level of crime that we've seen in this country for a number of decades now. So hopefully he won't face obstacles again. This is a mandate by the American people to deliver on his campaign promises. So we'll hope that plays out, but there could be some challenges going forward, as we've seen with a number of the actions that he's tried to take.
Yeah, but Jen, one of the obstacles you may face is the size of the bill, which could be enormous. And obviously this is an administration that's engaged DOGE and is looking at ways to reduce wasteful government expenditure. I mean, couldn't this be characterized as being a really good example of, I mean, if it's going to cost 3 times more per prisoner than an ordinary prison, I mean, isn't that a little on the wasteful side?
I think President Trump is willing to spend money where it's a smart investment. Some might say it's wasteful. Yes, it is costly to open this facility, but then you look at how much money is wasted right now on the border crisis, on deporting individuals that have come here illegally, $17,000 a person. Now the administration is saying, hey, we'll offer you $1,000 stipend once you confirm via the CBP Home app that you've made it back to your home country. That's a lot cheaper than going the other route and spending 17 times as much. So listen, this administration is looking at saving the American people taxpayer dollars, but at the same time, smart investment like this that shows that we're being tough on crime, that might assist with some of the crime rates that we're seeing, might deter a lot of the crime that we've experienced in our cities, deter these individuals from trafficking drugs into our country. That might be well worth that investment.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Jenn Pellegrino, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Jim Trusty, former federal prosecutor and attorney to President Trump, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Trusty, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Just want to start by asking you, what do you make of this idea of reopening the prison at Alcatraz?
Well, I think it's a pretty fascinating idea. I mean, President Trump seems to never sleep, and he's just coming up with ideas every second of the day. This is one that, look, it's not like it's a practical necessity to reopen the space that's been closed since 1963, but it's a symbolic one, and it's a pretty powerful message. I mean, Alcatraz was viewed as an impregnable prison, an inescapable prison. They had 14 attempts in their 29 years. Most people think none were successful because, number one, it was high security. Number two, really cold waters with strong currents and great white sharks. So not a place that anyone really had a great chance of success, even if they got through the walls. Although there's one kind of mysterious escape attempt that people still talk about. But look, the bottom line is he's sending a message, and it's dominating some of the news coverage for him to talk about Alcatraz. It strikes some fear in the hearts of some as a very difficult place. But I'll tell you, from being around criminal justice for, 35 years now, some of the federal penitentiaries that are there to be for the worst offenders are pretty severe circumstances. They may not have the nostalgia or the romance of being a little island off San Francisco, but there are some pretty tough places like the ADX facility in Florence where, literally terrorists play checkers with FBI turncoats and Oklahoma bombers. So, I mean, there's some really pretty horrendous people that get stacked up in these places with high security.
Yeah, I mean, American prisons have a reputation for being pretty terrifying places the world over, and yet it doesn't seem to be deterring people, does it? Because there's a prisoner population of close to 2 million people. But just going back to Alcatraz, I mean, does it sound to you like President Trump has put the idea out there to sort of see what people think of it? Or do you think he's really thought this one through?
Probably somewhere in between. I mean, I think he's certainly capable of throwing out some trial balloons and saying this is something I've been thinking about, which is how he phrased it when it came out. But I think you'll see him probably follow up on it. I mean, he ordered the Secretary of the Interior, the Department of Homeland Security, the Bureau of Prisons, and I think the FBI to all kind of weigh in on the possibility of reopening this facility. The infrastructure is basically there, although it's been sitting as essentially a tourist destination for like the last 50 years. But I think it's probably fairly serious that he wants to pursue this, again, for the symbolism, being able to tell people, this is a central message of law and order in the new administration to reopen a place as, infamous or famous as Alcatraz.
Yeah, because it's beyond symbolism. I mean, in terms of practical necessity, I mean, it only addresses a very small part of the problem, doesn't it? With a capacity of a couple of hundred. I think even when it was last operational, it never really had a population of more than about 300 people. I mean, when it comes to addressing those 2 million people behind bars in the United States, and we're talking here about a drop in the ocean, quite literally, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not the perfectly practical solution to all issues of incarceration at this point. But again, you're talking about a place that had Al Capone, a place that had Whitey Bulger, a more modern day racketeer criminal. And so, I think that it's not a terrible message to send if you're trying to be pro law and order, that you're going to reopen a place that has housed some of the worst of the worst.
but perhaps raises a few eyebrows and a few questions when it comes to the cost, because when it last operated, as we were saying just a little earlier on, I mean, the average cost per prisoner was 3 times higher at Alcatraz than it was in ordinary prisons, because everything had to be boated in. There was no water supply, there's no sewage. I mean, it's not the most practical place to have a prison, is it? Why not start from scratch somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what we've seen over the years in the United States is a lot of difficulty in cost management when it comes to prisons. And, you know, obviously, you want to make a place that's secure. You want to make a place that's escape proof, but you also want to have it as a place that's economical for the people that work there. You know, the administrative folks, the guards. That's what makes Alcatraz such a different baby, that you're literally on this tiny island in the San Francisco Bay. So you're right. It's not necessarily, economically the best case scenario to have a place like that. But the flip side is it was around for 29 years and it was escape proof. And between the practical realities of where it's located and the symbolism, I think, again, it's not an absolute, but a definite chance that this is going to be looked into and something that can be refurbished in coming years.
What about initiatives to tackle crime, sort of, and nip it in the bud and perhaps tackle the issues before they even escalate to this level? I mean, what sort of crime prevention measures do you think we can expect to see from this administration?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, look, the emphasis that's been coming out of the Department of Justice so far has been very heavy on illegal aliens, offenses committed by people that have no legal right to be here, fentanyl trafficking, which continues to take the lives of people across all economic classes in this country, gang enforcement, going after some of the gangs that are notorious and violent and that have been fueled by 4 years of an open border. So there hasn't been nearly as much kind of prevention, early age type things that you've seen in the past administrations sometimes. I'm not saying they're not going to happen, but it doesn't seem to be the most immediate kind of crisis in the eyes of the Department of Justice. I think they're correctly saying, look, we've had 4 years of nearly completely open borders. That means there's a lot of people that have bad histories or bad intentions that are floating through this country unaccounted for, and they're trying to stop that issue before they probably tackle, the crime prevention kind of notions that you might trot out in the high schools or the junior high schools across the country to convince people to stay away from crime.
Sure, Jim, we get shown a lot of numbers and we speak to a lot of people on this channel, and you hear it a lot in the media generally, that people who enter the United States illegally or legally are statistically less likely to commit a crime than people who were born there. I mean, I expect you see these numbers all the time. I mean, tell us what's true and what's fake news here.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's it's the old saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So there's a lot of manipulation that goes on in terms of how people treat the data. But look, most immigrants that come to the United States, even if they're coming illegally, in other words, they're coming without any sort of permission slip from the government, most of them are not looking to commit crimes. They're looking for a better life. They're escaping from places like Venezuela, or historically from Central America, or even more recently from places like Haiti or the Far East. So you get a lot of people that are coming purely with the mindset of helping their family. The problem that a lot of us have with that is it's not that they are going to suddenly turn into criminals. It's that they're skipping the line, that there's so many people that go through the process legally to come into this country and to assimilate and to be part of the American culture, to not be afraid of being arrested. And we favor legal paths over the illegal paths. But then there's certainly a percentage of the people that come over illegally, and I suspect it's a higher percentage than ever from these last 4 years, that have bad intentions. I mean, I used to prosecute a gang called MS-13 when I was a federal prosecutor, that has its roots originally in Los Angeles, but eventually through Central America and really all places around the world. MS-13 is a horrifically violent gang. And the one thing I learned is, as you would take them out, as you'd go after the leaders of the worst and imprison them or deport them or both, you'd have replenishment. You'd have people literally coming up from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, saying, we've got to restock this gang. And we saw this over a period of lax immigration enforcement, where the gang really wasn't getting shut down because they could replenish from the south, from different countries. So, that's the concern that I think the president, the attorney general have, that I think is a very legitimate one, which is if you don't have some sort of fence, some sort of real disability from people to come up and replenish the ranks, we're never going to tackle the gang problem.
Just lastly, Jim, I mean, more terrifying to most human beings than being put in a prison on an island surrounded by shark-infested waters is the idea of being executed. Do you think we're likely to see more executions from this administration? Is that something that you think as well, in your capacity as a former federal prosecutor, do you think that's effective as a deterrent for would-be criminals?
Well, the last part's a really thorny academic question in terms of deterrence, and a lot of people feel very strongly that general deterrence is kind of a myth, but specific deterrence, it certainly is. And I think what you're going to see is again, a rebuilding of the federal death penalty. At the 11th hour during the Biden administration, he did something that I think was highly unprincipled. He said, I'm against the death penalty. So he commuted almost every federal death penalty case, I think it was like 37 of them, except for 3. So you can't really say you're against the death penalty except for those 3 guys. That's what happened. I don't think that sat well with this administration to see that kind of a huge change in death penalty policy at the last minute. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more circumstances where this attorney general signs off on seeking the death penalty. Maybe it's going to be high-profile cases or gang cases. I'm not sure what the exact criteria is going to be for when that Rubicon is crossed. But I think we're going to see an uptick, and we're going to see death penalty prosecutions. It still takes years for the execution to take place in most instances. So, deterrence is kind of tricky when you might be on death row for 5, 6, 7, 10 years. But again, I think the message coming out of this White House and this Department of Justice is going to be, reinstating the death penalty as frequently as they can.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Jim Trusty. Thank you very much indeed.
Sure, good to see you. Thank you.
Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Hugh Hurwitz, who's the former acting director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, who joins us now from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, sir. What do you think of this idea about reopening Alcatraz? Is it going to happen?
Is it going to happen? I mean, I can't imagine that it's going to happen. I think I first saw the president's tweet about it. I actually saw it in a report, and I thought it was a joke at first, and then lots of media seems to be picking up on it, and I guess it seems to be a real idea. But no, I don't think it's going to happen for many reasons, and I'm happy to talk about those. I just think it's not a practical place to put people. It's not ready to. Obviously, the building itself, if you've ever been there, and I was there about 20 years ago, it's literally falling down. I mean, the walls, the ceilings are literally caving in. So it's going to take an astronomical amount of money just to make it habitable for people and for safety and security reasons. It's not in any condition to house human beings right now.
Okay, so that's the cost side of things. It's going to be expensive. How long would it take to get that facility ready again?
I mean, again, it's on an island. There's not even a bridge to go there. So you literally have to bring in everything by boat. It's going to take years to do. And I think I pretty much have to tear it down and rebuild a new prison there. And, building a prison takes 3 to 5 years, plus all of the environmental processes and other things like that. So I can't see them, even if they wanted to spend the money, having a building, a facility that could be used for a prison for at least 3 to 5 years. And again, the cost of doing so would be astronomical. I mean, the Bureau of Prisons is currently looking at building a prison in Letcher, Kentucky. And that prison sits on 500 acres of land. And that's going to cost about $600 million to build. They don't have that much land at Alcatraz. It's going to be a little tiny prison. And it's still going to take years to build and probably cost well over the $600 million that the Letcher prison is going to cost.
Right, and it's going to house a small prisoner population as well, probably just a couple of hundred prisoners. But President Trump said something about it that, you know, goes beyond the practicality of it and the cost aspect. He said it represents something, and he said it's a symbol of law, order, and justice. I mean, the idea behind this is not necessarily for it to be the most workable, desirable place for a prison, but to send out a strong message. Do you think that's going to work?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, prisons send out that message anyway. And the Federal Bureau of Prisons has 122 of them already, many of which are high security like this. As a matter of fact, they have the ADX prison in Florence, Colorado, which was built to replace Alcatraz. Well, actually, Terre Haute was used to replace Alcatraz at first, and then that became old, and they built the ADX in Colorado. That prison is the supermax of the federal prisons, and that sends the message that the president's looking to send. They already have facilities like that, if that's the message he wants to send. And they're already built, and they're not even full. So there's room in them. The ADX right now has approximately 250, 275 people in it, about 300 people in it, and has a capacity for 490. So they've already got prisons just like Alcatraz that send the message that the president's looking for.
Okay, I mean, why are there so many people behind bars in the United States? I mean, there's a total prisoner population approaching the 2 million mark, which does seem very high. I don't know if that's much higher than other countries, but in any case, 2 million people behind bars. Alcatraz would provide housing for 300 or 400 of them. I mean, it's just an enormous iceberg, and Alcatraz would just be the tip of it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it just would be a small tip of it, and the United States does incarcerate more people than many other countries do. And look, in the federal system, because remember, in the United States, there's the federal prison system and the federal laws, and then you have the state prison systems and state laws. I can speak mostly about the federal side. The federal side has taken some steps recently, even enacted under President Trump in his first term when he signed the First Step Act, which was a bill that was in part intended to reduce the prison population in the federal prison system. And it has done that. We have some 10 or 20,000 people less incarcerated in the federal system today than we had when the First Step Act was signed. So it has done some of that already. But yes, the president's trying to send a message here about law and order. And, you know, Alcatraz sends that message.
Sure, and what he said, President Trump, is, quote, "When we were a more serious nation in past times, we didn't hesitate to lock up the most dangerous criminals, keep them away from anyone they could harm. That's the way it's supposed to be." I mean, it sounds from what President Trump is saying like he is trying to reassure the US public that his administration is really tackling the issue of criminality, law and order at large in the United States. I mean, is that message coming across loud and clear?
Yeah, and I think that's the message he's intending, and it is coming across loud and clear. I don't think you need Alcatraz to send that message. The president has sent that message in many attempts through the campaign and in his administration. And most politicians do. Most politicians in the United States don't want to be seen as soft on crime. People don't want criminals living next to them or you know, in their communities. And so that's not an uncommon thing for politicians in the United States to get behind. The reality, though, is that we already have a prison system that can address all of these issues. And I don't know that we need to build another prison or reinstate Alcatraz to make that point.
And what about the issue of prisoners escaping? I mean, there seems to be a big argument about why Alcatraz is such an effective facility but it's got shark-infested waters all around it, very difficult to escape. No one's ever done it, although perhaps maybe 3 people did, although no one's quite sure about that. But in terms of, you know, high security prisons in the United States with high-tech facilities and detection systems, how much of an issue is the escape of prisoners?
Right. Well, and Alcatraz certainly appears to be more escape-proof than others because of its location. But to be honest, the reality is escape isn't the problem. today. People don't escape, especially the criminals that the president's talking about, the high risk, high security criminals. They don't escape. There's no escape problem. The Bureau of Prisons doesn't have people escaping from their prisons. It's extremely rare. It hasn't happened in years. People are not escaping. They have fencing, they have guard towers, they have stun lethal fences that if somebody hits the fence, it will shock them and potentially kill them. So people do not escape from prisons. I mean, El Chapo is incarcerated at Florence right now, and he was known for escaping prisons in Mexico, and he's been safely incarcerated in the ADX for some 4 or 5 years now. People don't escape from federal prisons. It's not a problem.
All right, so bottom line, a prison that was built in 1934, which is when Alcatraz was built, how well adapted would you say such a facility would be to today's needs?
No, it's not. I mean, it would have to be complete. It would have to, pretty much have to be torn down.
And could they tear it down? Could they tear it down? Because it's a historical monument, isn't it?
Well, that's a good question. That's not my area of expertise, but yeah, sure. I don't know that they could even tear it down, but I don't know that historically they could do the changes that they need to do. They don't have cameras. The cells, I mean, if you were a 6-foot person, which is not, not a unusually tall person, you can't even stand in the cell fully upright. The cells, the walls are literally crumbling. You see movies where people take sharp objects and chisel their way out of a cell. I don't even know how accurate that is, but you don't even need a sharp object in Alcatraz to do that. You could literally use your hands. So I don't know how you could reinstate Alcatraz without rebuilding it. But even if you were to find a way to do it without tearing it down, it's just not in any condition to house people. There's no no security cameras. There's no safety devices. Look, part of the problem being on an island, if there is a medical emergency or a riot or other law enforcement emergency, you can't bring in assistance without getting boats to come out there. You have to transport the staff to come out there by boat and the visitors. It's just a huge undertaking to operate a prison on an island like that. And in this case, it's just not in any condition to house people.
Just lastly, I mean, I think I know the answer to this already, but how do you rate the chances of Alcatraz being ready to receive prisoners by the end of President Trump's term in office?
I think it's almost impossible to do that. Very unlikely to do it. And the only way they could possibly do it would be to spend an astronomical amount of money in doing that, probably in the billions. And, with all the cost cutting that they're doing across the government, I just can't imagine them spending that kind of money for such a small impact.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you. We really appreciate you talking to us. Hugh Hurwitz, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Outstanding. Thanks for meeting it. Take care.
That is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Till then, bye-bye.